I'm Bishop John, Chairman of the Task Force on Mental Health for the Assembly of Bishops. Because we're living in such complicated times, the bishops are reaching out to leaders of our community to help our faithful navigate. Two experts on healthy living and thinking are Father Theodore Petrides and Christy Buck. Father Theodore is a parish priest with 26 years of experience. Father Theodore serves Saints Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church under the Amaphorion of His Eminence Metropolitan Salvus of Pittsburgh. Father Theodore and his presbytera have 6 adult children and 3 grandchildren. He's past president of the Alumni Association of Hellenic College Holy Cross Greek Orthodox Theological School and has served on the board for 16 years. He's also taught pastoral care and counseling at St. Tikhon's Theological Seminary for the past 2 years, and in March launched a podcast entitled Signs of Our Time on Ancient Faith Radio. He regularly travels in America as well as in Greece and the Holy Land as a pilgrim, guide, and speaker. He often speaks at conferences and retreats on various subjects, including spiritual direction and contemporary spiritual fathers, and has written a book entitled Ascetics in the World. Christy Buck is a licensed social worker with over 33 years of experience. Christy passionately leads the Mental Health Foundation of West Michigan, and her desire for transforming and saving lives through mental health, suicide prevention, and education has led her to develop an evidence-based 4-step mental health suicide prevention action plan called Be Nice. Christy is also a certified instructor in mental health first aid and QPR. Christy and her team have educated thousands of individuals each year through their educational programs and other various speaking engagements and presentations. Within her Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church community in Grand Rapids, Michigan, she has served as Goya advisor and instructed religious education for 30 years. Christy and her husband are proud parents of 3 amazing children and is a graduate of Michigan State. Today, we're taking on the very real phenomenon of suicide, which we seem to be encountering more frequently these days. Suicide affects everybody in the community and is something the church can do something about. Father Ted, why are we doing this program at this time?
Thank you, Your Grace, and thank you for those kind words of introduction. We are doing this because of the times in which we live. You know, we live in an age of despair. You know, if there's any age that kind of sums up the struggle of man to find meaning and purpose in their lives, it is this age and the times in which we live right now. We see rates of suicide rising, especially and even during this pandemic, in an alarming manner. So this program is very timely because we are addressing a great need that exists in society. People have lost their way. They've lost a sense of God's presence in their life and meaning and purpose along with it. And this makes us easy prey for the evil one who wants to lead us ultimately into despair and to take our own lives.
Christy, these are certainly difficult times and scary times. Why do people suicide, and what can we all do about it?
So I agree with Father, and that is when there is loss of hope, when there is feelings of worthlessness, helplessness. But ultimately, it has a lot to do with mental health disorders. And there's so much stigma attached to mental health disorders and misunderstandings that many times people don't realize that they are struggling. And so they dismiss these feelings and they don't let anybody know how they're feeling. So oftentimes after someone dies by suicide, families are left behind wondering what happened, what could I have done differently? And so when we put the pieces together, and many times in some communities, they actually do mental health autopsies following a suicide, and they look into the depth what was going on, and it's very consistent that many times there's stressors going on in people's lives, there's depression, there's other mental illnesses going on, possibly in combination with substance use disorder. So I am very passionate about creating knowledge, getting facts out there to folks, so then they have confidence to take action. And so that's what my job is all about. I love working with faith communities because I think that so oftentimes people don't realize that God is such an important piece of protective factors in our lives. But we have to be talking about suicide. We have to face the fact that it's here. I truly believe it's unacceptable, but it's unacceptable because it is preventable. So with knowledge comes confidence to take action to save lives.
So what should we be doing as church communities first, and then perhaps as family members or as friends?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly just take us through an action plan, and then I'm going to have Father jump in. And because the action plan weaves so much of what we hear about every Sunday from our clergy and from our pastors, and I just feel like it'll be very, very helpful in understanding. I'm just going to take you through these slides. So the first step in this action plan is to notice, and there's 4 steps. So we take the word notice and we just switch it up, and it is literally notice, invite, challenge, and empower. So to notice is what all we want to do as good Christians is to notice the right, the good in people. And this leads to me to be able to notice what's different in someone. So in the previous couple episodes of this series, and I'm going to encourage everyone to go back and watch these. It's so important that you are able to recognize signs and symptoms when somebody is first struggling. So if you go back and listen to the webinar on depression and anxiety, those are the signs and symptoms that I'm looking for when somebody might be struggling. But what happens then is somebody can feel even more stressed, depressed, and anxious. And sometimes these get unrecognized and not talked about. So when I'm noticing when somebody might be on the path to suicide, I need to take it, and I have to understand that they are already struggling with possibly depression or anxiety, underlying thoughts and feelings about hopelessness and worthlessness and helplessness, and I need to look at underlying risks that may be present. So when I'm talking about suicide, I need to know that genetics plays a huge role. So if there was someone that took their life in their family, then I could be at risk to take my life. So genetically, I could have a predisposition to an illness called depression. And then on top of it all, I may have had a relative that took their life. So I'm at risk. In addition, men take their lives more often than women. So they have a higher risk factor. Women attempt more than men. When it comes to race, white, especially middle-aged white men, hold a higher risk for suicide. Age plays a very huge role, and right now we are under a lot of turmoil, and we know that suicide has risen amongst 10 to 34-year-olds. So we need to be paying attention to our kids. And when it comes to risk factors for kids, they are in complicated situations right now. So they're under enormous amount of pressure, stress that can come on through relationships, family dynamics, etc. In addition, people that are 65 years and older also hold a very high suicide rate. And why that would be is because many times their depression and anxiety can be dismissed. So we need to be aware that it also comes along with aging. Personally, underlying risk factors could be that I had traumatic experiences as a child. So I am at risk. In addition, personally, my values, my religion, my beliefs can play a good factor. They also, though, can be a protective factor, which we'll talk about. In addition, underlying risk could be that I'm using drugs and alcohol. Also, the season of the year, the time of the year can make a big difference. So people believe that it's during the winter months where there's higher risk, when in actuality, it's during the spring or when the seasons change where we see the most at-risk folks. And that is oftentimes believed that during the wintertime, somebody has the wintertime blues. But somebody who actually struggles with depression, spring brings it around a time where I feel the energy, I have more energy to actually take my life. So I need to be watching during those months. In addition, geography, where I live, where do I have resources for help? Do I live in an urban area, a rural area? And then in addition, now we're in the middle and it's the triggers for suicide. So there could be crises going on right now. There could be loss of freedom going on, meaning I could be in jail, incarceration, huge risk factor. I'm being fired from my job. I've lost my job. I'm being expelled from school. I have an illness that could be terminal illness, or it could be an illness that comes with a lot of pain. And then in addition, losses. So in general, when I look at the word major loss, we can't measure loss. Loss is also how we feel about losing things. So I can't minimize someone losing something that's very precious to them. Loss of anything. I need to be paying attention to signs and symptoms, and I need to understand that loss plays a huge role. So when I go back, I'm going to reiterate, people need to listen to the webinars where they talked about loss and grief and how it ties into suicide. Then it leads to full-out hopelessness. And how can I recognize hopelessness? And this comes from having conversations with people. Protective factors is that thing that stops it. And that's where we're going to talk about that in a moment. And then in addition, the big reason why we need to be talking to people directly is so I can understand if they have a means to take their life. So we're going to be measuring the risks, the triggers in their life. Do they have a means?
Christy, when we suspect someone is depressed enough to or anxious enough to hurt themselves, do you just bring it up and talk about it, or would talking about it cause people to have those thoughts and feel worse about it?
Good question, Your Grace. And that comes to this next step. And this would be where they are actually talking about taking their life. And that is a point where I have to invite myself to actually have a conversation with someone. And so even when we talk about, when you just mentioned hurting yourself, in the world of suicide prevention and in all of the trainings that I do and that I do on a national models and within Be Nice, the questions that we have to ask are directly, are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of taking your life? Because it's different than hurting yourself. So a person might be honest with you and say, I'm not going to hurt myself, but really they may be thinking of killing themselves. So I need to start by asking questions. And a lot of times these questions are going back to what I've learned about depression, what I'm noticing. And now maybe they're giving verbal cues, verbal signs. Maybe they're talking about life is pointless. People would be better off without me. I'm a drain on my family. I wish I was never born. I wish I were dead. So a lot of times people's first response is to say, oh, you would never want to die. You wouldn't want to be dead. Imagine how your family would miss you. Those are all true. But when someone says these things, they need to be confronted. And they actually need to be asked, are you thinking, how long have you been feeling this way? What you just said to me just now is that you don't want to live anymore. Have you talked to anyone about how you're feeling? So these little questions can lead me to find out more information about the situation. And then, in fact, you never give a suicidal person any idea by bringing up the fact of suicide. You actually open up a lid off a boiling kettle to spur a conversation. And so for someone, yeah, they might say, I would never do that to my family. It doesn't mean that they're not at risk, but it means that now I have started the conversation. In addition, a myth is that a person who is determined to kill themselves, nothing is going to stop them from doing this. And that is so false. Even the most severely depressed person has mixed feelings and emotions. And people who have struggle with depression and also who have thought about, have had suicidal ideation, they talk about this as being very, very, very painful. And psychological pain, can you imagine having in your head the feelings of wanting to take your life? That is massively painful. So how you ask the question is very directly, both to Father and to Your Grace. You have to ask specifically, are you thinking of killing yourself? And you go back and you tell them what you have noticed. You tell them what you have heard. You may tell them what you have read, possibly in a Facebook post, possibly in a letter, possibly in a paper they've written in a classroom. Anywhere where I might have an inkling that somebody is giving the message to me that they are thinking about taking their life. So being direct, are you thinking of killing yourself? Asking a question, have you thought about when or how? That tells me, is their intent? Do they have the means to take their life? And it's not going to work to argue with a person about it. You have to be a really good listener. Addressing fear and shame, many times for clergy, they'll end up at the doorsteps of a clergy because they are full of shame, they're full of guilt, they're full of helplessness, hopelessness, looking for that next step. A lot of resources. I do many trainings and they're like 2 hours long for suicide prevention. So obviously this is just a little presentation about what is very, very serious. So we want to make sure that as communities, you need to arm your communities to make sure that you know where there are resources for folks to get help and assistance. This is the National Suicide Prevention Line. Those people watching today, write the number down, 1-800-273-8255, in addition, a text line. And this is my favorite slide. What we're going to lead into with Father also is that these are these protective factors. And protective factors, we have protective factors for everything. How can I protect myself from getting COVID? How can I protect myself from ever having colon cancer, even though I might have genetic predisposition for that illness? Here we go. Do I have access to services? Can I utilize services? Do I have cultural or religious beliefs that discourage suicidal behaviors? And this is why we need to talk about suicide so we can have more open conversations about mental health in general, mental illness, positive beliefs and faith in the future. Where can I get there? Where can that message be resonated to me at all times? From my church family, having supportive family member, friends, and coworkers. Where in my church can I find these people? Where are there clubs and organizations where I can feel and I can empower myself to be a part of my big, larger community? And then ultimately having self-awareness. And self-awareness comes from learning more about the illness. So the more we talk about the illness, the more we bring attention to understanding the illness called mental illness, we will ultimately prevent suicide.
Thank you. Father Theodore, in your ministry, what do you do? And how do you help when you encounter these kinds of issues? What's the parish doing?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Your Grace, because it's not always what's in the forefront. One of the things that Christy was touching on is that there is, within our community, sadly, where our parishes really should be the place where people would turn when they're struggling, turn when they have difficulty. The factor within the sense of, well, I don't want others to be speaking about what I'm going through, my fear of what others might say, often keeps people from turning to their church community, turning even towards their priest in these times. So one of the things that we need to do is encourage them and let them see programs like this and whatever other resources are out there to understand, no, we need to talk about this. We need to be more open about and the seriousness of this problem. Because what will happen then, Your Grace, is that someone loses a child to suicide and the whole community mourns it. But then at the same time, people all say, but we didn't realize, we didn't know that this person was going through it. I remember one incident in particular where it was a brother of a person who had been a part of our community. He was no longer living there, but still in contact with the rest of his family. He was the one who really was forward about it, and he called me and he said, "Hey, you need to talk to my brother. You need some help. He's really struggling." Once you've made that contact, so as a clergyman, I'm on the lookout. I'm trying to keep my eyes open and looking for people that may be having some of these symptoms that Christy was describing earlier, these struggles in their lives. And I've learned I need to be very straightforward with them. And oftentimes I find they don't want to talk to me right away. I've gone over a person's home and just waited and kind of sent a message upstairs. I'm here, and when you're ready, you can come on down and we're going to talk.
But with your smile, Father Theodore, it would be difficult not to talk to you.
Yeah, no, but when a person's in that state, it's really hard to break through. And then to, as Christy said, to be very straightforward. I will explain to a person, there are 4 stages that a person who's considering taking their life can be in. The first stage is they're thinking about it, but they really couldn't do it to themselves. The second stage is where they're thinking about it, but they couldn't do it to their parents or to their family. They couldn't do it to others because how they know it would affect people that they love. The third stage is where they've decided to do it, but they just haven't determined when. And then the fourth stage is that they've decided how to do it. They just haven't, the third stage is they've decided to do it, they haven't determined how. And then the fourth stage is they've decided how to do it, they just haven't determined when they're going to do it. And so I'll just come right out and ask a person, so where do you find yourself? Where are you? And surprisingly, they're very forward about it because, as Christy said, they want to talk. After they tell me where they're at, especially if they're in stage 3 and 4, I will say to them, if you're in stage 3 and 4, there absolutely has to be intervention. You cannot get out of this on your own. And by intervention, I mean professional help. We may need to bring you to a clinic. We may need to bring you someplace where you're going to get the care that you need. Oftentimes the clergyman is really kind of spiritual triage. He sees something that's happening. He needs to act right away, but it's important. And I've learned, sadly, by the mistakes that I've made, that he can't do it on his own. And yet he has to be a part of it. He has to be the person that's encouraging the family and offering the hope that the church can give us. Certainly, there's so much that we do in the life of the church that will promote people to not just be honest and open about what they're struggling, but will help them to understand that the thoughts that are coming are not the truth. They are loved. They have others who care for them a great deal and will help. That there is always hope. I find when I'm talking with people who are struggling to this point that they're considering taking their life, it's very hard for them to find things to be grateful for. And that's one of the things that we'll actually discuss is we'll try to make a list of things to be thankful for, because the opposite, right, of this hopelessness is the awareness that there is good. There's awareness that, and so I've learned myself in counseling people that struggle with despair. One of the medicines, the therapies, is to get them to practice gratitude and finding things to be thankful for. And I'll just start that kind of conversation with them at the time and try to make it a regular thing that they start doing in their lives, is to looking for the things that they have to be thankful for. And that kind of widens the circle of the sense of, oh, there is love, there is hope around me, and shrinks that circle in the middle of there's no hope, and I just need to escape this. And that's where that lie can come in, that suicide would be escape from the pain that they're feeling.
Well, certainly the two of you are full of love and hope and willingness. Your presence here today is certainly testimony of that. And I think our parishes are blessed with people who really do care, who care about the church and who very much care about each other. So hopefully the beginning of this, that this discussion is the beginning of some real commitment to take the courage to speak more plainly and allow people to deal with those things that are uncomfortable, that that we, with Christ's help and Holy Spirit inside of ourselves, can take the courage to serve. Again, thank you very, very much. You've offered wonderful information, and we're all blessed by your presence.